Hi fellas, just thought I'd make a very short video tonight. I'm looking at the issue of the 5Gs going up during the lockdown, and other installations that have all popped up at a certain time. Now, the key point I'm saying is that you have to understand that all this stuff doesn't actually happen in a bubble. Um, it um, it's it's coordination. And what I'm basically trying to say is that when we look at New Zealand, we've seen that during this lockdown phase, suddenly installations all around New Zealand have been going up, 5G antennas, which have been going into schools, into playgrounds. One of the things I asked people to send me tonight, which I put up on my page, is of photos that they've collected around the countryside of this actually happening. Some of these photos are really great because they actually show you the people actually putting this up at the time stamps, so you can actually again coordinate the fact that it's actually happening now. Some of them even come with confirmations from the people that they've spoken to people and said yes, these are 5G, or they've spoken to Spark. Numerous people from multiple different sources, and none of these sources are connected to each other, have stated that people that they've spoken to have said, well, yes, it's going up, but they can't talk because they're under contract. That's a very key point, which I'll come back to. Numerous things I've spotted over the year that during sensitive installations being put up, that's become a very common practice to turn around, bring in a workforce, make them sign a contract. Boom. Now we'll start with that's happening in New Zealand, but we're also seeing overseas that same thing is actually taking place as well. And again, is being documented by people taking photographs, putting them up on their Facebook pages and so on. First point before we can get into the issue about why this is a big deal is the fact that it's going back to the fact that workers are putting this in and signing contracts. That alone in New Zealand, what's happening means that you've got to bring in lawyers to draft the contracts. You then obviously got to have safety plans put in place. You then have to work out a coordinated work scheme, a roster sheet, and that all takes timing and place to put in place. And it's very strange. I mean, you think about it logically. I mean, to me, it's actually kind of a smoking gun. Those 5Gs, that all this has actually happened, all coordinated in March. Oh, gee, what a coincidence. Now, let's step back a second and go, well, wait a minute. It's not just actually happening here. It's also happening in Australia, in the United Kingdom, in America, in Europe. So again, that's all these communication companies have decided all to suddenly have their lawyers and contract firms set up, and their installation plans and their safety plans put together, so that all happens now. What a fucking coincidence. Anybody care for a tui? What I'm basically saying is that's actually a really good indication of foreknowledge, that these people had a foreknowledge of an event that was going to take place. Second of all, let's step back again, because again, this is, as all these 5Gs have been rolling out in New Zealand and overseas, we have that other case of looking at the timing, which is, this is the same time that Space Force is launched. Space Force has launched at the same time that Elon Musk has chosen to launch his Starlink, which is a telecommunications satellite network link. That telecommunication link's first job is actually the ability of the military to assimilate civilian telecommunications into its network. So again, this is stuff that all takes, it doesn't happen in a bubble by itself. It takes a considerable bit of coordination, bureaucracy, planning. So for that to actually take place at the same time as the 5G thing's happening, you're going, oh, well, let's just imagine we're playing a game of Risk. And for those who don't know Risk is a game of world domination where you try to take over the world. And you do this by putting little counters and mustering up little armies. And you can normally tell, when you're going to get attacked, because suddenly the country next to you has, the guy puts down 30 fucking markers in the country where he's planning to attack. And it's a pretty good indication that he's going to attack the country next shore, because that's why he's put his army in place. Very simple logic, And this is what we're basically seeing, is that, if you imagine this whole world as a giant risk board, oh, look, the 5G counter has gone on the board. At the same time as the Elon Musk counter has gone on the board. At the same time as the Space Force counter has gone on the board, and they've all coordinated so that they work and assimilated to each other. Wow. I mean, if you cannot understand how much that shows you the foreknowledge and planning of what's basically going on. I mean, it speaks for itself. You have to be a moron not to get it, that these guys have turned around and put this all together. Of course, the next thing aspect we get into this issue of, we'll hold the safety second off, is that the other aspect of it too is that when we actually looked at Patient Zero, which is a story which I'm actually still working on, the key players in that are, I won't say US military, we refer to them as kind of NATO players that basically turn up, they put their people into Wuhan, into the military industrial games. Those are the people that the Chinese have basically pointed the finger at. And that's the Chinese pointing the finger at these people, saying, the Chinese state government saying, hey, we think these guys are the bad guys. And by itself, you just dismiss it. But then when you turn around and you look at those companies in question, and again, I'm not going to get too much of the names because that's a separate post, but the point I'm just trying to make is that those companies then turn out to be, oh, look, that's the same guys that are actually linked to the lab in Winnipego, which was linked to Chinese people being arrested and Chinese and Americans. So we're talking about not nationalities, but we're talking about people who work for these conglomerates. So that's, I think, very important. We're not talking about governments who've been arrested for basically taking vials of material and sending it to labs in China. This has also happened, as we've seen, with Harvard, and there's at least one other lab which I'm aware of which has been locked down and they're not going to be opening up, and there's an investigation on. So 3 separate labs, all sent material to China. And I'll come back to the reason why it's not a state aspect of the thing at this point, because the Chinese are saying, hey, wait a minute, these guys are bringing it in. So one group say, well, pointing the finger at these guys and say, oh, look, this is proof that the Chinese are doing it. But you actually look at how the Chinese state government is responding, they're actually blowing the whistle on these people, as so appears to be the case in Russia and China as well. So the nationalist governments are responding basically to a group of people whose allegiance are fundamentally in nature more multinational than being linked to an alliance or affiliation to a country. Things like Snopes have turned around and attacked the Winnipego situation and gone, no, that's nothing to do with bioweapons, and that's all fake news. Well, that's not correct. And again, it's this thing that you see quite happen. The same thing happened during the fires in Australia, where suddenly this claim came out, fake news. But then if you actually look in the Australian case, the fires that broke out, which again took place in territory, which is where they wanted to put in things like 5G networks and a high-speed train running on basically a 5G network. We find that if we go back, as I've done stories in the past, you go back and you find, I think it was about up to 16 mainstream newspaper reports that were all giving different cases of arson that occurred in Australia, who documented them ultimately and painted this picture. So for when they turned around and said, oh, there's no fires happening in Australia, well, that's not what they said a month ago. So they just completely changed the story, said, oh, it's fake news, yet their own data from only months ago show that's not the case. And this is the same situation which happened in the Winnipeg lab, because the one that said, oh, that's not connected to espionage and bioweapons. Well, you can actually find stories going back to 2018 and not 2017, which had mainstream papers going, hey, man, this is something fucking whack going on with this laboratory. So that same laboratory is the one that's actually suddenly popped up in this equation. So again, it's not just the Chinese pointing at the group that the Americans that came to Wuhan as part of the military games. It's basically those Americans then link back and turn to a series of events which have been under media scrutiny. Of the media would actually turn around and check its own records, and are also part of some very, very well acknowledged spy cases that are taking place. A lot of these cases in the Winnipeg situation have tied into Canada, or they're tied into the Royal Mounted Canadian Police. As we have just seen with the Cameron Altus case, which was broken last year, Cameron Altus was the intelligence analyst who turned around and was discovered to be basically selling secrets to cartels and other criminal NGOs. Um, the assimilation at the time was with simulation, and some of the earlier media was that actually he was selling secrets to the Chinese, and there is an element of truth in that, because while the cartels that this guy was dealing with in terms of the Sinaloa Mexican cartel and the Russian cartels were actually fronts for money that was going into China, that money, and I've said it previously myself, said that money was state-based hedge funds. Well, it's true, but ultimately more it's going into a multinational network of people that are more interested in pushing this globalist agenda than necessarily pushing the agenda of the national government. And again, in China, it's a little bit complicated because you have the situation where everyone looks at China as a state, but the existing regime that runs there at the moment basically comes out of a pedigree of Chairman Mao, and Mao himself was married into one of the Sung sisters, and the Sung sisters, there were three of them, and one of them married Mao, who's the top communist, one married Nakaching, who was the Naka, bad pronunciation, but he was their top nationalist, and the third guy married their top banker. So the Sung sisters had a hand in each, a bob each way, if you like. And of course, the Sung sisters themselves were a Chinese, very powerful Chinese family that had got their power basis because they had chosen to get in bed with the Dutch East Tea Company in the 1800s, to basically allow the Dutch East Tea Company to get into China, at which point they bring down the Ming dynasty, which is a royalty dynasty, and they replace it instead. The end result of it was they replaced it with a communist dynasty, but the actual communist dynasty itself came out of this Sung family. What we're seeing is, so they're the dominant group that's in China at the moment, and I'm very simplifying this, and again, China's not my ultimate area of expertise, so I'm kind of keeping to simples, because at the end of the day, if you don't want to ask about the US, the UK, or New Zealand, Australia, yeah, great, but China is an area which I didn't do a lot of my training, so I'm having to learn on the ropes. China, these families came from that dynasty, but they're of course up against a younger or new group of Chinese power base, what we call the New Guard, that are more basically aligned with this concept of making money out of hedge funds, which are telecommunications and space-based technologies and new technologies and hedge funds. So it's old guard versus the new guard, and this is very much happening all around the world. It's a complicated situation because I don't see it as a goodies or baddies. I can see basically the old world order. I can see a lot of these nationalist orders are basically got there on the background of the oil companies, whereas this order is, so we could call that the oil world order, whereas what we're looking at is what you would call the new world order, which is, these are the ones that talk about sustainability and climate change. Great buzzwords, but ultimately at the end of the day, and they're using it to break the back of this old power group, or group that's sort of based on oil. So there's not necessarily goodies or baddies, and that's very easy because we all brainwash into watching movies and seeing it that way. But the world doesn't work in black and white; it works in shades of grey. But that's where we are. This group of people, of course, what they want to turn around to is they are selling a lot of pitching it as a green version of a new world. It's going to be full of diversity, cultural tolerance, all these things which sound absolutely fantastic, and I wish they were absolutely true. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what it's about is actually control of energy stocks. But the energy source is basically wrapped around the whole idea that we're using rare metals such as lithium and so on, and this will allow them to, in a situation like Lockheed, who's one of the big guys, these we could say the new order, they want to actually create their own super lithium batteries, which are batteries that don't just run your phone; they run actually capable of running factories, and this will put them in an interesting situation as a corporate, because they're not only selling you a product, which of course then means that they control, because they've got to get the raw materials for that product before they can make the product, sell it to the market. So it keeps everything sort of, nobody has all the apples. But in this situation, then it makes Lockheed the person that's selling the provider. They are the control of the energy source, and they're the control of the raw material, because these same groups are also into a lot of the mining for this technology, which is, the problem is it's equally caustic and toxic as the oil industry, mining industry is going. However, ultimately what you still talk about is you talk about two resources which are fundamentally both finite control resources with a limited, there's not unlimited amount of rare metals as much as there's not very raw materials. But what they're basically counting on is that by counting these rare metals, it allow them to actually take greater control of the energy field. They can control the prices. They can control things like scarcity, and also now, of course, it's heavily tied into the whole space race as well, which part of this big race is the race between these different sectors, which to get out into space to suddenly start mining these metals, and the one that can actually get out there will again have air superiority, and they'll also have control of energy, which will make them the dominant party. So what we're seeing very much is a race for control of energy resources. Bringing it back down to earth is that, of course, this means that they want to really see this roll out, this 5G, because the thing about 5G is it also is the backbone for huge technological control. It allows us to turn around and basically run massive AI systems, which again reduce the need for labor, which at the same time means that they don't have to do what the workers do. They can do what they want and tell us what to do because they have the power and technology to do so. So they're really keen to have this technology. Subsequently, what they are doing is they're really downplaying the health impacts of 5G. To the point that our mainstream newspaper articles will turn around and say, "Oh no, 5G is not hassle," that fringe element. But they give the game away because these same newspapers, like the New Zealand Herald, is a classic example, are actually carrying massive articles about how wonderful 5G is going to be, and then you look down the bottom and actually discover that it's actually not an article, that it's actually sponsored by people like Vodafone and Sparks and so on. So, it's not journalism, it's actually total propaganda, corporate funded propaganda. Also, you move into things like this, which are things like Bill Gates Foundations, Google, Amazon, which are all technology based. So they're controlling all the algorithms at the moment. So if you turn around and you look online, you start to go 5G health risk, especially if you go into the news section, which kind of represents the mainstream news or what is deemed to be the credible news. In those, because they control those materials, they push right to the back all the peer review material or the material out there that indicates that there's some serious health work indicating that this technology actually is not that particularly healthy for human beings. However, there is a way around this, because instead of going googling 5G, say immunization system, what I would suggest you do is just simply Google electromagnetic frequency, or EMF, or electromagnetic radiations, which is what 5G produces large volumes of this, and then Google immunization system. And when you do that, you'll find that there's actually a large volume of work out there that makes it very, very clear that this kind of technology actually really does attack our immunization system at a huge level. This, of course, all begs to the question of, these guys out there are not stupid, neither are the governments, despite whatever they may we like to pretend. So while I know that they've got this massive health issue going on, which I think is a genuinely serious health issue, they know that they are willingly knowing that they are rolling out the technology which will actually put corporate profits before public safety. So this is a real indication to you about how much your government can actually be trusted, and that you can rely on them actually doing the best thing to make sure that the 5G, the coronavirus is, you're not at risk. The reality is they are putting you at risk by actually rolling out this technology, and their refusal to not to run a moratorium on this technology until further research is done is very much like what Helen Clark did during the GMO, where Colgate revealed that basically the Labor government was actually quite happy to bring in GMO food, even though they knew there was a risk. And it's also very similar to what we see in terms of Labor telling us that they were going to not walk away from the TPA, but then they went ahead and did it. Of course, that TPA is another part of the equation which we're forgotten about, because we're not really talking about it, is that if this is the physical hardware side of things, if you remember before, Anna talked about the need to write out lawsuits and do contracts. Well, TPA created the legislative framework which allowed them to actually do this. And of course, the final point is that the proof to me, to bring this point home, is that they have chosen to do this while we're under lockdown, while it's very hard for us to turn around and actually draw public attention to this, and while they actually are controlling the main information stream, the terminology for that is called information dominance. It's very much like the good old days of the Banana Republic, where the South American generals and the rebels, the people taking over the government, would roll in and take over the radio stations, going, "Arriba, arriba! You are now under control. This is the Democratic Republic of the Banana General, and if you don't do what we say, we will shoot you. Ha ha ha! Arriba!" And that's basically what we're witnessing, is that we're seeing them actually allow this, in terms of this is meant to be essential health, and they're using this as an excuse to roll out this technology and say, oh yes, but it already helped so much, help the health system. Again, all the planning and all the blueprintings, which you can look at things like the Helen Clark Foundation, or the Think Big Think issues, or some of these, DOFA Think Bigs, which are all these papers which have been put out beforehand, saying, oh, this is how we're going to sell the product. So they've actually already had an existing market plan. So again, that this is all happening at this time, that fits so conveniently into that system, which coordinates with all these other physical hardware that you can see actually being placed on the board at the same time in a coordinated fashion, is an indication to us that we're really witnessing everything that we've talked about. It's actually now rolling out, and if you are not willing to see this, it's either because you're one of the people making a vested interest in this, or you're choosing not to because you believe that you stick your head in the sand and it'll all go away, and then no, we were promised this, and well, stop dreaming that, because it's obviously not actually taking place, and the physical hard evidence this is the case is actually happening in your kindergartens, your children's kindergartens, your children's schoolyards, and areas where your children and community occur, right before you. And if you are a doctor, or if you are a lawyer, or you're a media person, or you're a member of any part of this corporate infrastructure which is allowing this to take place, well, have a good hard look at that physical hardware which is actually happening in your now local town. And it's very easy to find as the photos that we showing up and put up on social media now. And bear in mind that this is something that your children will be experiencing. By you going along with this, by not actually challenging that system, or choosing to put your hand in the sand and pretend that you're not seeing this, you are actually guaranteeing your harm to your children, and there is no reward, there is no escape out of this. This will have a direct impact on the health of your children, and if you are a member of an iwi, and you will not bring this to the forefront and use the power of the iwi, corporate iwi, to bring the government to task, shame on you. And if you're a member of a hapu, then you guys have the best power to bring your own iwi to task. And for all of you out there that are doing this, thank you very much. We couldn't do this without you. For the rest of us, what we really need to do is, when we're seeing this stuff actually out, is we need to photograph it. We need to make sure that the photographs are time-stamped. We need to, if you can see actual people installing it, even so much the better. If you can actually talk to those people, and obviously you get them on camera saying, yes, actually we're installing 5G, fantastic. But even if they will turn around and acknowledge this to yourself, the more documentation we have of this, the more photography we have of this, the more we actually bombard, and I use that word very carefully. I'm not talking snipers. I'm not talking taking small arms fire. I'm talking about using everything you can in your social media to bombard the shit. Share it with all your friends. Tag all your friends. Make sure they're doing the same thing. What I'm doing is I'm getting a whole bunch of people to actually send me stuff, and then I'm gonna screenshot the whole lot so that you've got not one photo, but basically, I'm already up within tonight just up to 10, 15 photographs. And then if I can put that up on board, and other people are doing that, so it's one photo of 15 towers, with 4 or 5 other 15 towers, and I screenshot that again, and then screenshot it again. The whole thing of one person tells 2 people, 2 people tell 4 people. This is how we need to do it. At the end of the day, we still have the manpower. This nonsense that we are under martial law, we are not under martial law. We are, at the end of the day, still a democratic country. There are laws that need to be obeyed. There is no law out there, whether it's the 2000 Civil Defence Act, that actually runs contrary. In fact, I should put it to another way. If that law runs contrary to the Magna Carta, if it runs contrary to the Treaty of Waitangi, if it runs contrary to the 1991 Bill of Rights, which then that law is simply actually not lawful. That's the reality. At the end of the day, we have plenty of documentation that also states that at the end of the day, common law pretty much will take precedent over legislative law, and that's the one which is based on Magna Carta. I won't get to too much, further down that road because we're not having a legal battle today. But what I'm basically saying to you is, it is a absolute propaganda bullshit to suddenly think that the government can turn around and do whatever it wants. It's not. They are public servants and they are answerable to the people. Whether we choose that happens or not is actually up to us. But what becomes lawful at the end of the day is defined as acquiescence. If you can get people, convince them that something is legal, then it becomes legal. So if you choose to go along with this, if you choose to think, oh no, we're under martial law and we have to do exactly what we're told, good on you. But I actually turn around and say, well, actually, there is no such thing as martial law. There are various powers in legislation which give the state powers of emergency, but those laws, emergency laws, do not override our constitutional mechanics. And as the Attorney General stated, Margaret Wellston, during the TPA protests, that we have had governments on both sides of the Parliament for 25 years passing legislation which is constitutionally questionable. Just because they are passing that constitution doesn't make it lawful. We, at the end of the day, are the ones that actually, if they won't actually call themselves to task, then we actually have to do it for them. At the current moment, we can still do this within the confines of actually not having to breach our bubbles. We can still work as a team. We have plenty of technology out there and plenty of smart people who work actually how to do that. Martial law doesn't mean that you can't leave your home. So if you're on the way to the supermarket and you know that you've heard of one of these towers out there, then go past, take a little video clip, share it on your social media page. A lot of people are complaining also at the moment that when they go to share stuff on the social media page, the algorithms are blocking it, the share pages are disappearing, the likes are disappearing. Yes, again, fully aware of it. Guys, basic law of warfare is that when you're dealing with a high-tech enemy, then go low-tech. At the end of the day, you can still take that information, set up an email. Remember the old days where we used to have email chains? Well, go back to those because they're a bit like the analog versus digital. They're actually a lot more harder for them to actually block and control or filter. So if you're finding that you can't get your information shared out on Facebook page, then set up an email mailing list, and then make sure that your stuff's going out to everybody on your mailing list. And that way we can override the social media blockade. Okay, I think that's enough for me tonight. I hope this gives you guys food for thought and also makes you aware of the fact that, you don't need to take this lying down. You are all smart, capable people. It's really, really important that you get out there and actually interact with each other and, be active. If nothing else, one resource which we've been given plenty of at this stage is time. So let's make use of this time productively so we make up for what we don't have necessarily in terms of tech and money. We make up for it in terms of actually just sheer group numbers. There are a lot more of us than there are of them, and it's up to us to get that wave rolling. This is Ben Vidgen signing off from Ben's World. All take care out there. Just remember that the universe will do what the universe is going to do, but it doesn't mean that you have to turn around and just be a victim. Good night, everyone. Take care.